Mirage That Became a Dynasty. It began as a rumor whispered through desert camps and distant trading routes, an impossible story about a leader who saw a future so unlikely it felt like a mirage. But mirages, when pursued with conviction, sometimes become the foundations of dynasties, and his journey would prove exactly that. To understand why this transformation matters today, we must revisit a time when the region was still fractured, when tribes guarded their lands with fierce loyalty and suspicion ruled every negotiation. Wealth was scarce, stability was fragile, and the idea of uniting these groups under a single vision seemed closer to fantasy than strategy. Yet one Sheikh, young and untested, dared to imagine what others would not, a nation born not from dominance, but from trust. His inspiration came from observing a simple truth. Every tribe cherished its identity, yet each one struggled with challenges that echoed across the land. Water scarcity, insecurity, limited trade. While differences divided them, their hardships connected them. And somewhere within those shared struggles, he sensed the outline of a destiny waiting to be shaped. The moment of clarity arrived during a nighttime gathering under a cloudless sky. Leaders from multiple tribes had convened to resolve a dispute, but the meeting dissolved into old resentments. Voices rose, accusations flew. The young Sheikh watched as history repeated itself, as unity slipped further from reach. And in that chaos, he realized something decisive. The region did not need another argument. It needed a purpose. When he returned home, he carried that realization like a flame. He began sketching ideas for shared trade routes, cooperative defense, and resource distribution that would benefit every tribe equally. Advisors warned him the idea was naive. Elders insisted alliances formed through survival could not be reshaped by modern ideals. Yet something in him refused to let the vision go. For he understood a truth older than any dynasty. The desert rewards those who see beyond the horizon. And that horizon was about to shift in ways no one could have predicted. His proposal for unity was met with immediate resistance. Tribal leaders, hardened by generations of conflict, refused to trust promises spoken by a single voice, especially one so young. They questioned his motives, his experience, even his right to intervene in matters older than his lineage. Every attempt at dialogue ended in tension, as if the past itself were pulling them backward. He realized the first obstacle was not strategy, it was perception. To the tribes, he was a figure shaped by privilege, disconnected from the harsh realities of desert life. So he made a decision few expected. He left the comfort of his home and traveled into the heart of tribal lands, not as a ruler, but as a guest. He slept in their tents, ate their food, and listened without judgment. He walked with shepherds at dawn, shared stories beside late-night fires, and learned how each tribe saw itself within the unforgiving landscape. Slowly, barriers softened, not because he spoke, but because he listened. Yet even as trust formed, opposition grew within his own ranks. Advisors warned that he was risking his safety and reputation by mingling so freely with groups long considered unpredictable. Some feared he would return with expectations too unrealistic to uphold. Others believed he was weakening his political standing by appearing too humble, too accessible, too willing to blur the lines between ruler and people. The tension sharpened when a drought struck the region, intensifying competition for water. Several tribes blamed one another, and long-buried rivalries ignited once more. It was the exact crisis elders had warned him about, one that could shatter even the smallest hope of unity. Yet as he watched the conflict unfold, he saw something different, an opportunity hidden within disaster. He proposed a temporary resource-sharing pact, offering his own reserves as a foundation of cooperation. It was a bold gesture, one that risked appearing desperate or foolish. But he understood the desert's lessons well. Scarcity reveals character, and crisis reveals intention. If the tribes could unite now, even briefly, they could be convinced to unite in ways once unimaginable. The pact succeeded, but not without stirring new complications. Some leaders began to question why a young Sheikh was so invested in their well-being. Rumors spread that he sought to control their lands, to claim their loyalty, to reshape ancient customs for his own benefit. His sincerity was tested at every turn, and with each test he felt the strain of balancing two worlds, his own council's expectations and the tribe's guarded hope. Still, A fragile trust had begun to form, delicate as the first drop of rain after months of drought. But unity, he knew, required more than cooperation. It required a catalyst, an event powerful enough to shift history's direction. And that catalyst was approaching, carried by forces none of them had anticipated. The catalyst emerged in the form of a threat greater than any rivalry dividing the tribes. A powerful foreign syndicate, seeing the region's fragmented state, began securing rights to critical trade routes and water sources. Their strategy was subtle: acquire influence quietly, then tighten control once dependence formed. By the time rumors reached the young Sheikh, the syndicate had already approached several tribal leaders with offers disguised as generosity. What began as whispers soon grew into alarm. If the syndicate succeeded, the tribes would lose autonomy, the region would fracture beyond repair, and any hope for unity would be buried beneath foreign ambition. The Sheikh realized that the greatest danger was no longer internal mistrust. It was external manipulation feeding on division. The conflict intensified as tribal leaders struggled to determine whether the offers were a threat or an opportunity. Some saw the syndicate as a shortcut to stability. Others sensed danger but felt powerless to resist. Meetings descended into arguments. Accusations resurfaced. Old wounds reopened. The fragile trust he had spent months building now trembled on the verge of collapse. He understood he had to act, but action required risk. And this time, the risk was enormous. He called for a secret gathering, far from the eyes of politicians and advisors. One representative from each tribe was invited. When they arrived, expecting yet another debate, they found a map spread before them, one unlike anything they'd seen. It detailed a unified trade network, shared water reserves, coordinated defense strategies, and a mutual pact that protected every tribe equally. It was not a plan for dominance. It was a plan for survival. Still, doubt remained. The tribes needed proof that unity offered more than words. So he revealed the intelligence his team had gathered, documents outlining the syndicate's long-term strategy, showing how each tribe would eventually lose control of its land and resources. The revelation struck with the force of a sandstorm. Leaders who once argued fiercely now fell silent, confronted by a common threat that none could ignore. Yet the greatest test was still ahead. One tribe, historically proud, fiercely independent, refused to commit. They feared unity would erase their identity. They feared any alliance would place them beneath the Sheikh's authority. And without their participation, the pact would remain incomplete. He approached them personally. No entourage, no ceremony, just truth. He assured them their customs would not be touched, their autonomy not diminished. He explained that unity did not mean surrender. It meant standing together so none would be forced to kneel to outsiders. His humility disarmed them. His sincerity moved them. But what changed their hearts was simpler. He offered them the leadership role in managing the first shared resource network, proving the alliance was built on equality, not hierarchy. The tribe agreed, and in that moment, the impossible happened. Every tribe, for the first time in generations, aligned under a shared purpose. But unity invited its own dangers. News of the pact spread beyond the desert, reaching the syndicate that hoped to divide them. And an unseen confrontation was now beginning, one that would test whether this newfound alliance was strong enough to withstand a threat crafted in boardrooms far from the desert sands. The syndicate moved swiftly, sensing their influence slipping away. They launched a campaign of pressure, legal challenges, aggressive trade tactics, and covert attempts to destabilize the fragile unity forming in the desert. Supplies were delayed. Agreements were questioned. Rumors were planted. Their goal was simple: fracture the alliance before it could solidify into something unbreakable. The tribes felt the tension immediately. Old anxieties resurfaced. Some wonder if unity had come too quickly, forged more by fear than trust. Others questioned whether standing against a powerful foreign entity was worth the risk. And in the center of this uncertainty stood the young Sheikh, carrying the weight of a dream that was suddenly under siege. He responded not with anger, but with strategy. He convened the tribal council beneath a vast tent lit by lanterns, a symbolic return to traditions that had anchored their ancestors for centuries. There, he spoke of resilience. He spoke of the desert's harsh lessons, that storms pass, but only if one stands firm. And he reminded them that division was the syndicate's greatest weapon, while unity was their only shield. The turning point came when he unveiled a countermeasure that stunned the council. He had secured a coalition of regional allies, nations and partners who recognized the value of a united desert and were eager to support its independence. These allies offered trade guarantees, diplomatic backing, and resources strong enough to neutralize the syndicate's pressure. What had seemed like a defensive pact now transformed into a strategic force. The climax arrived when the tribes, now fortified by collective strength, issued a joint declaration. The desert would govern its own resources, protect its own routes, and shape its own destiny. The syndicate, faced with an alliance far more powerful than anticipated, began withdrawing quietly, its influence evaporating like a mirage under the rising sun. In the weeks that followed, unity deepened. The shared networks were established. Trade flourished. Water reserves stabilized. For the first time in generations, tribes that once stood at odds now built alongside one another. A new identity emerged, not a replacement of old traditions, but a bond strengthened by shared purpose. He returned to the gathering place where the pact had first been signed. The desert wind whispered across the dunes, carrying with it echoes of everything they had overcome. The dynasty that would later rise from these sands was not built through conquest or force. It was built through trust earned, not demanded. And as he looked across the horizon, he understood that the mirage had never been an illusion. It had been a vision of what the future could be, waiting for the courage to bring it into reality. Sometimes the smallest shift in perspective becomes the beginning of a new future.